Florida State Seminoles are trending for portal quarterback Colton Joseph. Now the Noles need to add a general manager to help seal the deal with offensive and defensive linemen, linebackers, and more. And it's not just from the transfer portal. Florida State needs to hit the high school ranks hard.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back into Locked On Seminoles. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day on the nation's #1 podcasting network, Locked On. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, you can head over to FanDuel and get ready for all the NFL action and eventually place those live NFL bets as the playoffs are coming closer and closer to us. All right, today's show, it is a lot of different stuff going on, and happy and Merry Christmas to everybody out there. But the transfer portal hits. Last year and the year before, Florida State missed out on those. This time, they cannot miss. Florida State, we're going to talk about the GM here in a little bit, but at the end, after all this stuff together, this is the big part. Is Florida State going to have the right people together to make sure their transfer money for the NIL pile is going to be for the right people? And yes, part of that is offensive line. It's something we talk about consistently here on Locked On Seminoles. How are they going to piece that together with the new players they're going to bring in with some young guys? I have my thoughts on that a little later in the show. We're definitely going to talk about the general manager position because it's not been filled. I have a strong theory as to why. But to start the show, Colton Joseph, is he likely? Is it the right decision? There are rumors that he is going to end up at Florida State. But what's the cost, not just in dollars, but for Florida State long term? I give my take on that now. Colton Joseph is an elite athlete. He fits Gus Malzahn's offense. I've discussed him many times here on Locked On Seminoles. 6'2", just over 200 pounds, quarterback from Old Dominion. He has 2 years of experience. He's originally from LA, over 1,000 yards rushing this past season. He's a pretty good passer, but not elite, but has all the tools to run Malzahn's offense, and quite honestly, about any. He's got a pretty good arm. I think this is the kind of guy that you're going to see make a splash wherever he goes. But here's the first question that I have. If they spend the reported $2.5 to $3.5 million that a lot of teams are talking about for quarterbacks this year, I don't know where Florida State's going to fall on this list. And I don't know exactly what Joseph's going to command. Is that the right number? Because Florida State, in my opinion, is not going to be a title contender next year. What are they trying to do if they bring him in? And how does that impact Kevin Sperry? There's a whole bunch of questions that fall off of that. Because that money out of that pile, it has to be solidified for the reasoning you're going after this guy. Like, what is the reason if you're going to take? And again, he's a really good player. Don't get me wrong. But are you going to win big if you spend, let's say, $2.5 million on a quarterback this next year? Are you bought in to doing that? And in the process, how are the younger guys? Jaden O'Neal's enrolling. Kevin Sperry will be a second-year player, a redshirt freshman. And are you going to get another quarterback? Because they don't have another scholarship guy on the roster. So that's a really big situation to find yourself in. Again, no GM. We'll get into that momentarily. But all of those questions come together, and Florida State doesn't even have a complete staff because the GM is a vital part of it. That's part of their job, not just negotiating the contract, but giving the eval, finding out the backroom stuff. Hey, what's this guy like off the field? How's he going to represent Florida State University? It's hard to say. And to put it into perspective, I'd heard that Florida State was trending, but I've heard Florida and some other schools too, Wisconsin once in. Then I read something from Brendan Sonnone over at Noles 24/7. They might spend $2.5 million on him. I honestly think that somebody will make a bigger offer, but I digress. If that's the case and they do get him for whatever the number is, again, I cannot say this enough times. If you go that route and you lose either one of those young quarterbacks, is it worth it? And even if you don't, are you really sure that he's going to get you to the promised land? And that means like 8 wins has got to be minimum. If you're spending $2.5 million on a quarterback, like that's got to be minimum. Is this roster going to be at that point this next season? I have strong questions about that. And we'll get into the GM in a second, like I said, but let's look at the roster from just the skill spots. O-line, D-line's 10 times more complex. That's a little later in the show. But okay, you got Mekhi Danzy. Sounds like he's going to be back. Well, Wayne McCoy, maybe. I've heard different things about that. And a post he put up on X doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy. I think he's at least considering his options. And then there's Duce Robinson. Really talented. The NFL likes 6'6", 220-plus pound wide receivers. I can assure you. If they lose him, is the juice going to be worth the squeeze, spending $2.5 million on a quarterback? I mean, you can't replace Duce Robinson. You can't. Ohio State would not be happy about it if they had it. And they've got more wide receiver depth than anybody. What's the best option here? I'm curious what Florida State thinks they can do this next season. And I love it when people are aggressive. Don't get me wrong. I just have my doubts. I don't think Florida State's in a position to compete for the playoff next year because they've had too many good players leave, and we went over a bunch of them already. But I haven't even touched on the fact that Randy Pittman and Landon Thomas, your two most talented tight ends, are both heading on. They're going into the portal. You have no players at tight end with any considerable experience coming back. Marcus and Douglas is gone too. He's out of eligibility. So what does Florida State do here? If you dump that much money into quarterback, you've got big needs at tight end. We're going to dive into O-line, D-line, and the GM situation here momentarily after the break. And you're not guaranteed that wide receiver is going to be where it needs. And we haven't even touched running back, defensive back, linebacker. This is a really interesting decision. I love aggressiveness. I love going for it because that's what Florida State has always done. But you got to assess your needs and look at your roster. Let me give you an example. I did a podcast on Wednesday on the Portal podcast that I do a live show every noon at Eastern time that was just a microcosm of what's going on. And I even mentioned Florida State 2 or 3 times. Some teams are letting some guys go. It's not that they don't want them. The money has to match the production and the timing. Let me give you another example. Ohio State last year. They won the national title, but they were $30-some million in the red as an athletic department. A lot of that was overspending with football. They were winning a title come hell or come high water. That was their philosophy. Is Florida State in that position right now? Obviously not, with all the renovations and everything they got going on. Highly doubt it. I don't think they got Ohio State's money anyway. So there are a lot of little things to look at, and I'm not sure this is the best decision. But I will be excited to watch Colton Joseph run around. Like, he's a freaky athlete and somebody that I think is fascinating because he played at Old Dominion. They're barely in the Division I level. He's got a couple of years of eligibility left. So if they get him, I'll root for him and we'll see what happens. But I have a lot of questions about it. And I also have a question about making this decision before you get a GM and why they don't have one. That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place live bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defender tightens up, and there's always the chance for that big turnover, maybe a scoop and score, to change the game. FanDuel allows you to get in on the action whenever it takes place, including finding out what's going on with the live spreads after that big score, maybe that quarterback getting hot. Money lines adjust. Everything will change. You could bet on the quarters. You could bet on the next touchdown. You could bet on the next touchdown for a receiver, whatever you want to do with FanDuel. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action all season long, head over to FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets. The game moves fast, and so can you with FanDuel. All right, thank you once again for making this show your first every day. Locked On Seminoles is happy to have you here. And to that end, if you want to take the next step, the Everydayer Club, make sure you come in and check it out. Down in the description below, I've got a link. It will take you over there. And here are a few of the perks. If you haven't already learned about it, your audio, whenever you take Locked On Seminoles with you to the grocery store, if you're going for a walk, if you're going to the gym, if you're going for a long drive, no ads, $5 a month. And if you want to do it another way, you can pay $50 for the year. Locked On Seminoles for you. Make sure, again, you like and subscribe. But if you want to go to that next level, check out the Everydayer Club down in the description below. Now let's talk about the general manager situation and how it impacts the whole scenario with Colton Joseph, fixing receiver if it needs to be fixed. Definitely got to fix the tight end situation. 2 guys out the door. Offensive line and defensive line, I'm going to dive heavy into in about 20 seconds. And there's still other spots as well. But before we do, I'm just going to ask a simple question and come back to it at the end of this segment. Is there a main reason that Florida State has yet to hire a general manager? I have a pretty strong take on that. If you watch this show much, I bet you know what it is. It's real simple. I think a lot of guys are very scared that Norvell's not going to be here long term. And more than likely, they're concerned with the people in the building not allowing the GM to have much control. It's more of a title. Everybody's got an ego. They want to have power and say. It's understandable. A lot of different schools, not just Florida State, have people that get offered jobs or offered to get interviews, but they really aren't that interested because they don't want a title. They want to have the production behind their name, meaning I made this decision. I moved the program forward. Then I can move my career forward by showing, hey, wins on the field. I did this. Call my boss. He'll tell you what we did in this meeting. I made that decision. Brendan Snow brought this up, and I'd wondered about it anyway. Then I read that. I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Check out Noles 24/7. They do a great job. It's an article Brendan put up, but I agree. Florida State is an easy place to get hires. It's not that hard. It's in the state of Florida. It's a national program. It's Power 4. There are national titles. Renovated stadium. The fan base is rabid. It's not that hard to get people to come to Florida State. But all of a sudden, they can't get a GM. The power thing, I'm not going to believe anybody. That's just my opinion. Sonone just added to it. I don't doubt that at all. And again, FSU's not the only place. Coaches, as I say commonly, are the most stubborn people on earth. Giving up power is about like stabbing themselves in the eye. They hate it. Sometimes you got to do it. And a lot of these administrations are trying to force it on them because they want different people to be accountable and have more hands into the pot to figure out what's going on. Coaches don't necessarily like it. If I ever find out that I'm wrong, I'll gladly raise my hand. But I doubt Norvell or anybody else in that staff really wants to give up much power. Again, that's just the nature of the beast. But there are several other schools in the same boat. Now let's talk O-line, D-line. I've said many times they got to get back to high school players on both sides of the line. In the trenches matters, man. In this past season, I mean, the Desir twins, just for one, Kevin Wynn, another, they hit pretty big. And they just signed a class with like 10 guys in the defensive line, JUCO kid, et cetera. They might take 1 or 2 portal players. But here's my question. I've got a handful here. Is Florida State going to be able to really get that next guy? This next recruiting class wants to get the GM. It's one simple theme at every single position. I have one question that's added to every one of them. Did you or did you not sign an elite player? Offensive and defensive line is where it starts. The teams that are going to go deep in the playoffs, you look at their high school recruiting, by and large, Indiana's kind of the oddball there. The teams that are making a run, elite high school recruiting in the trenches. Florida State's improved, but where's the 5-star guy? Kevin Wynn was definitely that guy. Okay, great. I expect him to contribute. He was just banged up this past year, whatever. That'll take its course. But that's one guy. They need 2 or 3 kinds of different types of players like that a year. One year it's a corner. Next year it's an offensive tackle. Then it's a D tackle or whatever. They need somebody like that hits, not just sign, but like you got to sign 3 or 4 because even 5-stars completely flake out. We've seen it at FSU and everywhere else. They have to hit on those guys consistently. I don't know if they're going to do it, but they've got to do a better job of evaluating, and hopefully the new GM will help them find that guy at each spot. Again, checkbox, yes or no. And again, I'm focusing on O-line, D-line the most. Are you getting elite high school linemen? That's something I'm curious about because if they're going to go out and spend a bunch of money on Colton Joseph, all right, but then you better have a whole bunch of money to spend on the younger players because this idea in my head, I just can't get it out. Are they going to sign a bunch of players that are just good again and tread water with the portal players, like they don't spend enough money on the high school ranks, never truly getting over the top. I don't want to see the administration just prop up Norvell. He has to win the right way. That's slow and steady. There is no quick way, even with the portal, because the roster is too far gone for that. You're not a playoff team next year unless you're going to spend like Oregon does. That's not going to happen at Florida State, barring something unforeseen. I just don't think so. Prove me wrong. Last point on this, again, at least one on both sides of the ball. It'd be really nice if the elite offensive lineman next year in the 27 class is an offensive tackle. Herb Hand's a good coach. He's a pretty good recruiter. I know it's a tough situation, but some way, somehow, for Florida State to take that next step, they've got to get elite offensive tackles. They've signed a few good ones over the last few years with a lot of potential, but there's not been that one dude you're like, hey, this guy's coming in. He's going to play. They got Kevin Wynn this past season. That's a heck of a start for the defense. And then the Desir twins hit on top of it. That's great. Now we need to see that on the other side of the football. When we come back, transfer portal hits. We've talked about Colton Joseph. We talked a bunch about the trenches. Linebacker, how do they mesh that with what they're allegedly going to spend, give or take $2.5 million on a quarterback? Is it going to work? That is next here on Locked on Seminoles. All right, this is a very important question, and I usually have a strong take. I don't have one on this. Why did they hit so well on 2023 but not 24 and 25 with the portal? Part of it, I mean, you can look at some of the guys they hit that they had the hunger. They took a few guys in 22, 23 that weren't necessarily the elite recruits out of high school, but they proved themselves other places, including a certain young man that came to Florida State from Albany, of all places. I'm still just blown away by that. Ends up being a first-round pick, NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year, blah, blah, blah. All pro. You have situations like that, but yet Florida State in 24 misses on the Alabama kids and the Georgia kids that flamed out after being 4 and 5 stars. And by and large, none of those kids met the expectations they had out of high school. Well, a few of them were decent. Why is it that Florida State missed so much on evals? And it's why I brought up the GM situation a little bit ago. I don't know the answer. Is the GM going to help? Because again, power play in college football in the back office happens all the time. I've literally had coaches tell me in the past, they almost came to blows. And I mean this literally, arguing about whether recruit A should play this position or that one, which side of the ball, or whether they should even offer him or not. Grown men. I mean, it's ridiculous. But that stuff happens. Football coaches can be just as senseless as 17 and 18-year-olds sometimes. But that's why I'm really curious about the whole GM scenario. Are they going to allow whoever it ends up being to come in and provide input and actually take it? A lot of places, I don't think they are. And we'll see in a couple of years how it all works out. But there's a few places that I know they are, and they're excelling. I'll leave it at that. And I know that it's not easy. Can these coaches put their ego aside and figure it out? And regardless, before the GM comes in, because Florida only knows when it's going to be at this point, the portal opens on January 2nd. Is FSU ready to make the right decisions across the board? Forget Colton Joseph and quarterback. With everything they do with portal. I don't feel warm and fuzzy about it. It's hard enough as it is, because a kid could be really good somewhere and he sees the big check and then they check out. That'll happen. That's not Florida State's fault. Sometimes human beings just do stupid things. Fair enough. But Florida State has really missed bad 2 years in a row. It just can't happen next year. What kind of assurance is there that Florida State is going to hit in 2026? Why should you or I believe Florida State will make the right decisions? That's not an easy thing for me to try and dive into and feel comfortable with. Many of you have commented on the Locked on Seminoles YouTube page about, hey, These guys don't know what they're doing. These guys can't evaluate. These guys can't coach me if they do get the right guy. So I know many of you, obviously not all, but many of you aren't real confident either. If you have a reason that I should be confident, let me hear what it is in the comments on the YouTube page, because I'm willing to listen, but it's not just the eval, it's the fit into the scheme. It's the totality of the coaching. It's not just like Tim Harris. I know he was a good guy. He's a really good coach, but it's got to be all of the following. Play calling's got to be right for some receiver you bring in or develop out of the high school ranks. And it's got to be the right offense. You got to put him at the exact right spot at receiver. There are different ones. It's slot, it's outside, it's boundary. All those things. Is everybody going to get together and put all the pieces into the cauldron and make it work collectively? It's not an easy task, I grant you, but I'm not warm and fuzzy about it because they've missed 2 years in a row. And it's so ironic because in 2023, I said it a million times, this is the best staff in the country at evaluating the portal. And then they completely missed in 24, and it wasn't exactly great this past year. We're going to see here pretty soon, but the transfer portal hit rate is very important because they've got some turnover. They've got some guys who are out of eligibility. This is going to be very, very truthfully a difficult process. And the final point, the same thing I brought up early on, it can't just be portal guys. They've got to hit on some recruits. So the 27 season, they have guys hitting the ground running, especially in the trench. I know this is a big ask. They've got to get elite linemen. Elite, no doubt, no if, no, we like him because we about, no. Everybody wants him. You out-recruited him, and he's a dude that's going to come in and play both sides of the ball. Let's see if Florida State can do that. And again, it's why I'm a little bit concerned about Colton Joseph and why he may or may not be the guy for Florida State, because it's not just about 2026. It's the long term of the program. Thank you very much for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Merry Christmas to everybody. I hope you are safe with whoever you're spending your time with, family, friends. It's a great time of year. Please enjoy it. I will see you again soon. This has been Locked On Seminoles.